So the war on freedom of speech is continuing. This is happening in our country, even though we're supposed to be the beacon of free speech absolutism. This is from NPR. Take a look. They say, U.S. denies entry to leader of movement to boycott Israel. Now, this guy had lived in the U.S. for over a decade. He doesn't anymore, but he did for over a decade. And the U.S. government is refusing to say exactly why they denied entry. Now, you're going to be able to put two and two together in a second, but notice how weaselly that is. They're not going on the record. They're not saying, yes, we're not allowing him in because we don't like his political opinions. But that's effectively what it is. But they're not officially saying, and they're not letting him in even though he lived here for a decade. So, let's see what they say. Omar Barghouti had scheduled a speaking tour that included stops at Harvard and New York University, meetings with Washington policymakers, and an appearance at a bookstore in Philadelphia owned by Professor Mark Lamont Hill, whose CNN pundit contract was terminated last November over controversial remarks he made in support of Palestinian rights. At the end of the trip, Barghouti planned to attend the wedding of his daughter, who lives in the United States. BDS supporters see Barghouti's movement, which draws inspiration from a similar campaign against apartheid-era South Africa, as a nonviolent way to protest Israel's military occupation of the West Bank, construction of settlements, which most of the world views as illegal, and other rights concerns. The approach has experienced a surge in popularity in recent years, with dozens of student, academic, and labor groups announcing support for BDS, artists such as Lord and Lauryn Hill canceling shows in Israel. So this is a leader in the BDS movement. He's got a speaking tour planned, and magically, he's denied entry to the U.S., even though he used to live here for 10 years. They know he's not a security threat. What's the reality of the situation? They don't want him speaking his mind. They're afraid of the consequences of this guy coming here, speaking his mind, and explaining why he thinks BDS is the proper response to illegal Israeli occupation and their current apartheid state. They don't want him having freedom of speech because they don't like the consequences that might come about as a result of it. Now, this is where some people inevitably say, well, but they're not locking him up in a U.S. jail or prison as a result of this, so what's the problem? Well, the problem is this. The First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution restricts the government from taking away people's free speech, taking away our free press, taking away freedom of religion. It stops the government from cracking down on those things. So this is, without question, the government cracking down on those things, just not, they're not literally locking him up in a prison or a jail cell, but they're still cracking down on those things and singling people out for negative consequences and repression and suppression because they don't like his opinions. So this is absolutely a violation of the principle of freedom of speech. And even, you could say, from a legal perspective, this violates his rights. So, listen, where's Rafe Dubin? Where are the other right-wing so-called free speech warriors? They only use this issue, they only trot out this concept when they want to defend their own, people who pretty much agree with them ideologically already. And also, by the way, there's a little trick that they do where they'll scream freedom of speech sometimes, not because they want to have the right to say something, but because they want to cover up for the fact that one of the things they're saying is factually wrong. You know, like they'll say something that's untrue, and then when somebody tries to correct them, they go, "Wow, you don't believe in my free speech?" It's like, no, I'm fine with you being allowed to say it. I'm just saying that you are incorrect in what you are saying. So there's a conflation of the issue sometimes with how they approach it. But this is an instance where it is clearly politically motivated, trying to take away somebody's free speech rights, and you're not going to hear a goddamn peep from those people. You're not. Because they don't agree with the guy politically. So they don't care that his free speech rights are being taken away from him. Well, we do. And we're actually principled. I defend people who I disagree with when it comes to freedom of speech, and I defend people who I agree with when it comes to freedom of speech. But I do find it pretty interesting you don't see that happen on the other side very much. Very rarely. Every now and then it will happen, but it's super rare. But here you have an issue where there is a consensus among the U.S. establishment, you do not criticize Israel. And does that have something to do with the Israeli lobby? You bet your ass it does. Ilhan Omar was right. She's not saying I'm against all Jews. She's saying the Israel lobby, and by the way, she also says it about Saudi Arabia, money and politics, these respective lobbies control our politicians because that's human nature. They give them money for their campaigns, and then those politicians do their bidding. She's right. And there's another example of it here. Everybody should speak up in solidarity with this guy. Even if you don't agree with BDS, you should stand up in solidarity with him because this is an absolute violation of what freedom and civil liberties are supposed to be.